Welcome everyone. We could already say a good Erev Shabbos as we learn the special segment called for the Shabbos table this week for Parsha Shmini. This year is made possible by a grant by the Reuben family where they ask us to please be mispal for them to have a healthy Ben Zohar and also for the Hatzlacha in Ruchnius and Gashmius. I want to add we should learn L'Refuah Shalema for my Shver, who is in rehab now. He had a surgery over Yom Tov. Avigdor Aryeh ben Rivka. You also learn for Chana bas Shoshabina, Rivka bas Shira Leah, Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel. They should have L'Refuah Shalema b'Sei Shachel Yisrael. This week's Parsha discusses all about things that are not kosher. One of the things that probably the world knows, if when the world thinks about something that's not kosher, it right away thinks about pork, about ham, right? Swine, otherwise known as pig. So the Torah says, "Ve'es hachazir kimafris parsahu," although it does have a split hoof, but it doesn't chew its cud, and therefore tamehu lachem. So, first of all, I want to talk to you about the etymology of the name Chazer. The word Chazer means to turn around, right? To be chazar, to turn. So the Psikta Zutrasa says that it's a fact. Check with your local zoologist. It's a fact that a pig has a very, very short neck and it can't turn back. So if it wants to see what goes on behind it, it has to do a complete turnaround. And that's why it's called a chazer, the Psikta Zutrasa says. You have to know that unlike other languages, in Lashon Kodesh, every word is intrinsically means the creature that it represents. So, for example, a dog is called a kelev. That's not dog in English. Dog is the same letters as God. So unless you worship the dog, it doesn't make sense. But in Hebrew, Kelev represents a dog because Kelev is kolev, with all of its heart. And the dog never bites the hand that feeds it. The dog is known as a very loyal creature. That's why, could you imagine that Yefuna gave his son the name Kolev? Who would call their son Doggy? Come here, Doggy. But Kalev ben Yefuna was called a Kalev. The answer is you see Shmo Garim, his name foretold his destiny. He was completely loyal to Moshe Rabbeinu. When he was one of the Meraglim, although 10 Meraglim went sour and went against Moshe Rabbeinu, Kalev together with Yeshua were loyal. That's why he was called Kalev. Kalev. But we're not talking about the dog now. We're talking about the Chazer. So the Psikta Zutrasa, that's a medrash, says it's called the Chazer because its neck is very short, and in order to see what goes on behind it, it has to turn all the way around. That's what the Psikta Zutrasa is. Many others say it's because it foretells the future. It says in the future the Chazer will become kosher. As a matter of fact, there's a famous word from the Satmar Rebbe, the Heilige Satmar Rebbe, Zechatzah B'Kodesh Bracha, Zuchus Yagan Aleinu. Satmar Rebbe asks, why when we make Havdalah, and we talk about all the distinctions, so we say, Lahavda ben Kodesh Chol, ben Or L'Choshech, ben Yisrael Ha'amim, ben Yom HaShvi L'Sheshes Yimei HaMaisa, but we don't say, ben Atomei or ben Atom. Especially since in this week's Parsha it does say Lahavdil ben Atomei ben Atom. So how come in the Havdalah when it says the distinctions, it doesn't say la'avdul ben atame ben atar. The Sama Rebbe says because the distinctions in Avdullah are nitzchi, are eternal. And the distinction of ben atame ben atar is not eternal, because lasid lava, the chazer will be kosher. So some say that that's why it's called chazar, because it will return, it will come back. However, I had a kasha on this part of the Satmar Rebbe. I had this kasha for years. Why is ben Yom Hashvi l'Sheishis Yimei Ma'aseh eternal? It says in the future it will be Yom Shekulei Shabbos and Menucha l'Chayei Olamim. So every day will be Shabbos. So there won't be a distinction. And it says L'havda bein Or Chayshich. In the future, the Aragonas, there won't be Chayshich. So I don't know what he means. Obviously, I'm not even equal to the dirt under the Satmar Rebbe's toenails. So it just I just don't know. I don't know what he meant. But they ask another question. Hashem could have made the chazer that it had none of the simonic kashrus. The chazer has one simon kashrus, and that is it has split hooves. So the kasha asks the Yitzis Pnini Atayra, why did Hashem give the swine a simon kashrus? We know that swine is very bad. Rambam Nevuchim says it's not healthy, it causes trichinosis. But besides that, it's Metamtem Esalev. Why does it have one Siman Kashrus? So the Yitzis Pnina Atayra says another fascinating reason why it's called the Chazer. The pig is a very persistent animal. If it's at, its paradise is the garbage dump. If it's at the garbage dump and you shoo it away, it keeps on coming back. It keeps on being chazar. It keeps on coming back. That's why it's called chazer, because it keeps on coming back. And that's a good midah. The midah of never giving up. Shiva yipol tzaddik v'kama. A tzaddik might fall down 7 times, but keeps on getting up. We say yish shalom midas. If a person gives up hope, that shows he's not thinking. Yish shalom midas. It's just a catchy cliche. That's not the simple meaning of yish shalom midas, but it's a good thing not to give up. You fall down, you get back up, and you try again. I can't do this. People go, they try to be Mavasedra, they miss a week, I can't do this. They go to Daf Yomi, they miss a few days, it's not for me. That's not the way. You have to be persistent. V'acheichem kol beis Yisrael, Yifku es hasreifa asher saraf Hashem. Of course, this is talking about the death of Nadav and Avihu, how 2 laser beams of fire came out from the Kodesh Kodashim, split into 4, entered the 2 nostrils of each of Nadav and Avihu, and incinerated them. Was the loss of 2 great tzaddikim. So the pasuk says, "V'acheichem kol beis Yisrael yifku es hasreifa asher saraf Hashem." Very interesting. Moshe Zakein and Bali Tosfos. I have the sefer in the house. It's comments on the Torah from the Bali Tosfos. So the Bali Tosfos ask a very simple diet. It says, "V'acheichem kol beis Yisrael." Why does it say "V'acheichem kol beis Yisrael"? And the brothers, all of beis Yisrael, should cry. It should say, "V'acheichem kol b'nei Yisrael." What's this beis Yisrael? B'nei Yisrael. What's beis Yisrael? Beis, says the Bali Tosfos, is a reference to women, right? Bias is the women. Bias is technically a wife, right? It says, "L'kocha Mordechai loy levas, al tikra levas al lebayis." Mordechai took Esther as a wife. And when he says there was crying, he uses base because it alludes to the two Basherta Shidduchim of Nadav and Avihu who will now remain Agunos. Because we know that Nadav and Avihu died, they were bachelors. It says one of the reasons they died is because they didn't get married. Because if they would have gotten married, their wives would have needed them and they would have been saved. So it says the Das of Canaan Bali Taisvis, so it says V'achechem kol beis Yisrael, to allude that part of the crying is for these women that lost their future husbands. Now, if that's true, then could you imagine the 24,000 Talmidei Rabbi Akiva? If they were young men that were never married, they left 24,000 agunos. There were 24,000 women that were supposed to be married to them. So you'll say, well, maybe they were learning after their marriage. Rabbi Akiva was learning after his marriage. But then they left 24,000 widows with families. It's very important to know that this is part of the mourning of Sphira. You know, we don't shave. We don't listen to music. Somebody was telling me, it's very itchy not to shave. Very itchy. And we don't listen to music. We don't party. The mourning is especially powerful for all those women that lost their husbands or their future husbands. The Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, at least they went straight to Gan Eden. They got their kapara, they died the horrible death of Askra, and they went straight to Gan Eden. After all, they learned with Rabbi Akiva for all those years, 24 years. They went straight to Gan Eden. The women were now, the rest of their lives, either widows or alone without their basherta. There's 24,000 shidduchim not to be had. That is another important lesson over here. V'achechem kol beis Yisrael yivku es Hashem asher saraf Hashem. All of Klal Yisrael cried for the loss of the two tzaddikim Nadav and Avihu. Rashi says, Mikan shetzarosan shel talmidei chachamim muteles ala kolis abelba. From here, says Rashi, we see that when Talmidei Chacham have tzaras, everybody should mourn. Now, you'll say, why should everybody mourn? So the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, because Talmidei Chacham shemeis hakol nasin krayva. Everybody is like their relatives. When you hear a Talmid Chacham die, lo aleinu rachmanu litzlan, everybody is like a relative. Now, there's a very great value of crying over the suffering of a Talmid Chacham. In Bereshis Rabbah, Lamed Hey Gimel, it says, Kol HaMored D'mois Al Adam Kosher, Moichlin Lo Al Kol HaVonosav, this Mechila. And it says, another Gemara, Am Reb Shimon Pazi, Am Reb Shimon Levi, Mishum Bar Kapara, Kol HaMored D'mois Al Adam Kosher, whoever cries for a worthy person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Seifron, Umanichum Ubeis Genazav, he counts the tears, and he puts them in his treasury. And therefore we have to know that in these 33 days of mourning, it's an Indian to really mourn for these Talmidei Chacham, even though they didn't die right now. But this was such a great loss, 24,000 Talmidim and Rabbi Akiva. It's a big thing to mourn over Talmidei Chacham. Now we were talking about etymology of creatures. Es HaNesher, the eagle, the king of the birds. So the etymology of Nesher, the Balaturim brings down that the eagle goes through a period of molting. It sheds its feathers and gets new feathers. So that's the word nosha. Nosha means to shed. It sheds its feathers. And that's why it says, in Tilim, Tischadesh kanesha nurechem. You should renew like an eagle to your youth. It's interesting that in Yeshaya, in the Navi Yeshaya, Perik Mem, Pasuk Lamed Aleph, there's a very interesting pasuk. It's a famous pasuk. V'kovei Hashem, those that hope to Hashem, yachlifu koyach, their strength will be renewed. Yalu Ever Kinesharim, they will grow wings like an eagle. Yarutzu v'lo yigo, they will run and not get tired. Yelchu v'lo yafu, they will go and not get fatigued. Now the Radak is one of the major commentators of Navi. He brings from one of the Gainim, one of the most famous Gainim, Rav Sadia Gain. Rav Sadia Gain, that's before Rashi. Very great man. So Rav Sadia Gain tells us about the eagle. He says the eagle, once every 10 years, rises very high towards the sun until it gets very hot, and then plummets into the sea, sheds its feathers, and renews itself. And he says that this happens every 10 years until the eagle gets old, and when it flies up, it goes into the water and it dies, drowns. Interesting that it's brought down that the eagle is very heavy. The harpy eagle, the female, can be 20 pounds. Very heavy an eagle. Yet it goes, our observations are that it goes up to 10,000 feet high. That's why the eagle could be a problem for planes. It goes up 10,000 feet. And Radak says that the eagle is a metaphor in this pasuk. That just like the eagle, even though it's very heavy, flies high, so too the human, although we're way down with our chumrius, with our baseness, our materialism, our problems, our worries, if we have faith in Hashem and we pick ourselves up, then Hashem will give us that we should be renewed. And that's what it says, V'kovei Hashem, those that put their trust in Hashem, yachlifu koyach, they will have a renewal like the shedding of the eagle, its feathers. Yachlifu koyach, yalu ever kinesharm, we will grow like the eagle, and yelchu v'lo yigo, yarutzu v'lo yigo, we will run and not be tired. Yelchu v'lo yafu, we will go. And that's what it says. Toiv lachas ba'Hashem. It's good to trust in Hashem. Habiteach ba'Hashem. When you trust in Hashem, chesed yisayvevenu. This parsha tells us of the spiritual effect of kashrus. It says, "Leisitamu bahem." You shouldn't contaminate yourself with macholos asuris, with forbidden foods. V'nitmeisem bam. Now, v'nitmeisem is written without an aleph, so it doesn't mean simply you'll be contaminated by them. But in the famous Gemara of Yuma Lamed Tes, it says, Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel, Aveira mitamtemes libay shel adam. The sin fashtups a person's heart. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his Mesilas Yesharim, Mesilas Yesharim he had a very hard life. It was only posthumous that he was recognized by the entire world as being a very, very, very great tzaddik, and one who understood the profundities of Jewish philosophy to a very deep level. He was resurrected by the Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon was accepted by everybody as the greatest of the great. The Vilna Gaon says that in Mesilas Yesharim, until the chapter Prate Nikias, there isn't one extra word. Vilna Gaon said that if he was able to, he would walk on feet to learn by the feet of Ramoshe Chaim Luzzatto. So in the 12th parak of Mesilas Yesharim, Ramoshe Chaim Luzzatto, Zech Tzadik V'Vrach Eschusi Re'aleinu, says categorically that Machalas Asuras, forbidden foods, Machnisin Tuma Mamish, brings contamination, Beliba Yubanafshe Shaladam, At Shekedushasai Shalamokim Baruch Hu, until the holiness of Hashem, Mistalekes, removes itself from him, Umisrachekes Mimenu. The Ramban, who we all know, who could learn without the Ramban, he wrote a letter called the Geras HaKedusha, the letter of holiness. In there he says, forbidden foods, some of them are metamte mesalev, stuff the heart. Some of them are moilid azus, create in a person tremendous arrogance and chutzpah. Some of them are tsoigrim deles hatfuna, they shut the doors of understanding. And some of them are moilid chaloim, they cause sickness. The Ramban says, and the effects of the forbidden foods could be passed on to the next generation. He says that's why right after Pashas Shmini is Isha Kisazriya V'Yolda Zachar. So right after it talks about being careful with kashrus, it talks about having a child, because it could be passed on to the children. The Shach, from one of the Gurei Ari, he was one of the cubs of the Arizal from 500 years ago. He says that's why it says, Bonim atem la'Hashem Elokeichem lo yiseichel kol te'eva. You want to be a child to Hashem, be careful not to eat anything abominable. Today we are plagued with the plague of what's called off the D. Off the D is short for off the derech. Children at risk. Today they call them kip, kids in pain. The Heilige Sanzerav, the Divrei Chaim, he writes in Chelik Aleph, in his responsa, in his Shals Tshuvas, in Chelik Aleph of Yeridea, Siman Zayin, he writes, Baba Niseinu Arabim, because of our great sins, he says there are whole kehillos, there are whole communities that were lost to heresy because the sheikhtim and those that were baidik that did the nikkur and removed that which wasn't allowed to be eaten, they didn't know what they were doing. And people ate that wasn't kosher, and it stuffed up their heads, it stuffed up their hearts. The Framish Pri Chodesh writes that because in our day there are people that are not careful with kashrus. Many children go off the derech. And they're chutzpahdik. Ve'ein yiras Hashem nogas, believe them, they don't have fear of God. Va'afim yoichichem, and even if you give them proper rebuke, lav b'nei kabbalas musarein, they can't accept it because they're so stuffed up. Their spiritual arteries are hardened. There's a famous ma'aser with Rabbi Kiva Eger that parents brought to the Gadol Ador, Rabbi Kiva Eger, their child. There's a bright child, and he doesn't have any interest to learn. And Rabbi Kiva Eger researched and found out that one time the child was tempted to eat something not kosher, and after that he stopped having an interest to learn. Now, the Tufchei Yabir, Reb Zilberstein, says that this is not just eating food that's not kosher. He says over something amazing from the Kozenberg Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael now, Shlita. There are grocers and fruit store owners that have people that have bills by them for 400,000 or 600,000 shkalim. The Kozenberg Rebbe made an announcement: don't bring your children for a bracha to me unless you go and you pay the bills by the grocer, by the fruit store. So how are you going to have a bracha from your children if you're feeding children food that's gezel? How are you going to have a bracha? The Igra de Pirka, who was one of the Baal Shem Tov's great Talmidim, said that there are people that their children go off the derech because they're not honest in business, and they think they're doing good. They're feeding their family money of gezel, and that's ruining, that's being metamter. That's also not kosher. It's also not kosher. It's also not kosher gel. That's not kosher food. I just want to comment in closing. And before I close, first of all, it's interesting. I have a dashboard where I could see the people that watched the shir. I could see how many. So like last week's shir, I saw that the shir about Kriyas Yamsuf, the Shabbos table of Kriyas Yamsuf, I saw there were almost 600 people watched it. I want to tell those 600 people that there's another Chumash shir. It's aired live on TorahAnytime.com at 9 o'clock on Thursday night, and then it's archived. So it's archived late in the week. So this week, there is a shir called Shmini Gems 5785, or it's Shmini Gems. That's an hour shir on the Pasha. So that will be available for tomorrow and next week for your listening pleasure, viewing pleasure. Also, if you would like to sponsor a shir, to sponsor the big shir, which is sometimes heard just on TorahAnytime.com by 1,000 people, and it's also on Kol Haloshen by who knows how many people all over the world now that Kol Haloshen, Israel and America joined, and on YouTube and on Torah Communications Network. So it costs $360 to sponsor that big Chumash shir. If you're interested to do it, please text me at 718-916-3100 or email me at rmmwsi@aol.com. It's interesting, they asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky if a person who's being chayz b'tshuva wants to take upon themselves one thing, what should he take upon himself? So Reb Chaim right away said Shabbos. Because Shabbos is shokol k'neged kol haTorah kula. Somebody doesn't keep Shabbos, but for Hesi is like a goy. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, on the other hand, Zech Tzadik L'Vracha Zchus Yagan Aleinu, said that the first thing a person should do is should eat kosher. Because if a person doesn't eat kosher, it stops up the heart, and makes it impossible, as we heard, for the person to even possibly accept what they have to do. And I would recommend that if a child is off the derech and it's possible to bribe the child to eat kosher food, even though the child is doing all kinds of things. But if the child eats kosher food, it's a lot easier to get through to them eventually. Once they're eating in White Castle and McDonald's, and they're eating all kinds of chazarai, it stuffs up the arteries, the spiritual arteries. It's metamtem es alev, as the Pri Chodesh says, and it's very hard to get through to them. We want to again thank the Ruman family for making this available. Daf Yomi Matzah Shabbos, 2 Blad and Makis at 10:15 by zoomdaf.com, meeting code capital RMMW. During the week this week, Daf Yomi will be Sunday through Thursday, 8:25. Thank you for joining us, and have a good Shabbos.